But once again, thanks everybody for coming. Really glad that you could be here today. And we're going to present some really interesting engagements related to the rainforest, some that are new and some that is some new information related to some older ones that you may already know about. And I'm really excited to have multiple members of our engagement materials team today helping out and really walking us through all these materials. So today we've got Bev Toy, Ingrid Oyen, Jill Ross Kuntz, and Nan Sider walking us through all the different engagements that that we mentioned earlier today. So we'll be talking about the arrow turtles, the leafcutter ants, the orb spiders, as well as the butterfly emergence chamber. So it should be a great day with a lot of information. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Bev, who is going to be talking about the arrow turtles.
Hi, my name is Bev, and I'll be talking with you about the, well, I pronounce it Aru turtles. We have a lot of guests that come into the rainforest, and they don't even know that these turtles are there. And that's because we've got so many more impressive animals in that rainforest, like the arapaima and the red-tailed catfish. But these turtles are there, and a lot of times they're hard to find because they're napping down on that bottom and they blend into the rocks and everything. Okay, these turtles are known by several different names. They're also known as the South American.
Hey Bev, we lost your audio. Technical things always happen on a Friday afternoon. Yeah, you got muted accidentally.
There you go.
Oh,
Yeah, so sorry. We probably missed a good paragraph of what you were saying.
oh, okay. Should I
So sorry
go
about
back with
that.
the name?
Yeah, go ahead and
The
go back. Thank you. Sorry about
Okay,
that.
that's okay. Um, I I pronounce it Aru, and they are known by other names as well, such as the South American river turtle, the giant South American turtle, and the giant Amazon river turtle. Okay, our first Aru turtle came to us in 2009, and she was actually on long-term loan to us from the zoo. And it turned out that the zoo needed to find a home for their turtle while they were renovating their tropical building. And it turned out that our academy biologists had always wanted a turtle in the rainforest, flooded Amazon. So it worked out to be a win-win situation for the both of us. Okay. The staff named her Art, and that was short for Amazon River Turtle. She was confiscated in Miami, spent some time in the Miami Zoo, and then went to the San Francisco Zoo in 1997. And we got her in 2009. She was a full-grown turtle when she was confiscated, um, but she died last year in December, and it was thought that when she died, she was over 30 years old. Okay, Chris, could you put up the picture of the shell? Okay. The next one. Great. No. Thank you. This is a picture of her shell. We were able to keep it after she died, and it has been prepared to be. They finished preparing it actually, so now it's ready to go out on the floor as a specimen that you can take out. This is the picture of the shell when it was drying out on the roof as part of the preparation process. So we're looking at one end of the shell right now. And I know it's really hard to tell from the size or from the picture how big this shell is. Now, if you were to make a guess, how big or how long do you think the shell is in inches? from the tail to the front. If you want to make a guess, you can put it in the chat. That's pretty good. Somebody guessed, let's see, 3 feet. These turtles can actually grow up to 3 feet, 36 inches. However, our turtle was only 28 inches from the front, 28 inches long, but she was 16 inches across and 8 inches tall. Okay, that's the measurements that Chris gave me. I haven't really seen the shell itself yet, but because it is so large, if you're going to take it out onto the floor, you probably should put it on a cart. Okay, some things to notice about the shell. It looks very smooth. Chris, could you put up the next pictures of the, yes, thank you. Okay, so if you look at the Aru turtle that's on the left, you'll notice that her shell is quite streamlined looking. It's very flat and very long and broad. And that's because she is an active, actual swimmer. She has to swim against some pretty moderate river currents, and she needs to be streamlined to help her swim, as opposed to our alligator snapping turtle, which is on the right. And you'll notice that its shell is not anywhere near a streamline. And that's because the alligator snapping turtle is more of a bottom walker and doesn't really need to swim against river currents. Okay. As I was saying, these turtles can be 36 inches long, and they can weigh as much as 200 pounds. Okay, you can take the pictures down now, Chris. The males tend to be smaller than the females. Okay, we still have 3 remaining turtles in our Amazon, our flooded Amazon, and they were all born in captivity at the Bronx Zoo. They have been at the Portland Aquarium, and they've made their way to us. They're about 20 years old, and we still don't know what other sexes are. Okay, these turtles can be found in the freshwater drainages of, let's see, Guyana, Venezuela, and in the upper tributaries of the Amazon that are in um, Bolivia, Peru, Colombia, Venezuela, and in northern Brazil. Okay, they tend to live in the really large rivers um, or in the lagoons or in the flooded ponds. But in the dry season, they're always in the rivers, the large rivers. But when it becomes the high water season, you can find them in the flooded forests where they have a lot of food to eat. Okay, the turtles at the aquarium are fed basically balls made of chow and mixed fruit. And this is very typical of what they eat. They are basically herbivores, and they will feed normally on fruits and vegetables, aquatic vegetation, and even insects. Um, so the turtles are fed here twice a week. And we do have a link in your references that shows a picture of art being fed back in 2010. And in that video, you can see that she is being target trained. Our turtles here are being target trained as well. And in addition to target training, they get trained in basically, it's called, I guess, tactile and touch. And that's when the biologists actually handle them a little bit, just so they get used to being handled. And this is important because if there was ever a time when they needed to be treated or to receive medication or to be taken out of the tank, they're less stressed out because of the handling. Okay, during the dry season, the females will migrate to their nesting sites that are on the beaches. And there they will go ahead and dig a nest and lay 50 to maybe 150 eggs. And then they will cover these eggs with sand and leave. There is no parental care involved at all. Okay, so in 45 days or so, the hatchlings start to emerge, and they usually come out at night when it's cooler and when there's less predators around. Okay, and then they will head straight to the beach, or I'm sorry, straight to the water. Um, the interesting thing about turtles is that the sexes, or their sex, is determined by the temperature of the nest. So if the nest is about, oh, let's say it's in a shady area, the temperature is going to be lower. So what happens there is that most of the hatchlings will be males. If the nest is out on the beach in the bright, hot sun, the temperatures are hotter, and most of the hatchlings will be females. And in general, 82 degrees Fahrenheit seems to be the dividing point. At that temperature, you have 50-50. Okay, and it seems that the most important time period for determining the sex of these turtles is during the second trimester. Okay. As you can guess, the young are very vulnerable to predators, but the larger size of the adults tend to protect them, except from us humans. Okay, they are considered endangered by the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. The IUCN considers them at lesser risk, that they're conservation dependent, um, and they're not considered endangered. However, the eggs and the adults have been overcollected for food, and they are fairly rare in the Amazon. Okay, an interesting fact about this turtle is that it's a side neck turtle, and it's the largest of the side neck turtles. And what this means is that this turtle cannot withdraw its head into the shell. So what it will do is that it will swing its neck horizontally, and so the head gets hidden by the shell a little bit, but the neck is still exposed. Some of the questions that the guests may ask are how old they are, what they eat, how often they eat, what their lifespan is, and it can be up to 50 years, what their sex is, where we got them, how long they can hold their breath underwater. And that can range for turtles in general from 30 minutes to 3 hours. And of course, that depends on how active they are. The more active they are, the more often they have to take a breath. So if they're not very active, then they can hold their breath a lot longer. Some engagement starters might be to ask, have you seen the turtles in the Amazon, flooded Amazon? If so, how many did you see? Oh, how big do you think they are? Um, they do look kind of little. um, what do turtles normally do when they're scared? Turtles that you know of, anyway. And how would you describe their shell? And why would you think their shell looks the way it does? Other things you might do would be to direct our guests to some of our other turtles in the aquarium. We do have the Matamata turtle, which is also in the flooded Amazon, and it's in the tank that's very dark, so it's very hard to find him, but he is a nocturnal, or it is a nocturnal animal. You can direct them to the mezzanine, where we have little tanks with little smaller turtles, and of course, you can direct them to our alligator snapping turtles, and they can do the comparison there, because they're both technically about the same size. According to our biologists, the turtles have been doing really well during closure. They've been getting their twice a week feedings. They've been getting their training sessions with the biologist. and they've been able to take their daily naps at the bottom of the exhibit. Okay. Any questions?
Yeah, actually, Karen had a question in the chat in relationship to the temperature sex kind of relationship that happens with turtles. Is that also true for all reptilians? I know that it is something that's true for fish. So that's a common thing that happens with fish. Temperature can determine whether or not something is a male or a female. I don't know. Do you have any other information on that, Bev?
Well, for sure the alligators, because when we were talking to us about the American alligators, that the temperature does determine the sex with them as well.
Great.
But I'm not sure about the other reptilians.
Got it. And then anyone's welcome to put anyone's welcome to put any information in the chat bar if you want. If you have any other questions, we're going to take about 5 minutes to kind of do some clarifying questions. So feel free to run those over on the side there. And there was a question from Barbara. Do we have a plan to have a beach for turtles to lay their eggs in the rainforest? That would be amazing. That would be so incredible. I don't think that's going to happen, unfortunately. I'm not sure actually what happens when the turtles lay their eggs in that tank there. I'm guessing probably, I don't know. I have no idea what's going on with that. I don't know if they actually are able to lay eggs because I think the 3 that we have left are female.
Well, I don't know what they are.
Yeah, I'm not certain either. I've never heard of them laying eggs in there before, but you never know. Things someday that may actually happen. So yeah.
All 3 in the tank are female. That was told to us by Kylie Lev on our first volunteer happy hour.
Oh, okay.
Thanks, Janine. Perfect. Yeah. So there probably will not be laying eggs anytime soon in there. So yeah. Any other questions while we've got Bev here on the Arrow Turtles? What I'm going to do also is share a link in the chat bar to that YouTube video with the Arrow or Arrow turtles and showing them how they were feeding. That was also linked to everybody in the email that I sent out, but just in case you want it, it's there as well. So yeah. Cool. I'll give it just a few more seconds if anybody has a question, and then otherwise we'll keep moving right along here. Looks like everyone's good. All right. Excellent. Thank you so much, Bev. That was wonderful. Really appreciate hearing about that turtle. I'm excited for everybody to get a chance to see that. It's an amazing shell. It's quite heavy, but it's beautiful and it's an eye catcher. Just in the time that I was taking it from downstairs up to the roof to be able to put it on there, and it was a pretty mild day. There wasn't a lot of people in the academy. I had probably a dozen kids stop me and be like, "What are you carrying? What is that giant turtle shell?" So it's an eye catcher. So it'll be really fun once it goes out on the floor. And we're going to shift gears a little bit because we're going to start talking about ants. And I'm going to turn it over to Ingrid to tell us all things about ants.
Glad to talk to everybody. Excuse my voice. The pollen in the air has caused all sorts of problems. Today, you're going to put up the picture. Okay, we've had these ants when we were down on Howard Street and continued here. Thanks, Chris. And so what I did was when it was suggested that we talk about these ants was compile a list of facts along with the PowerPoint that the Academy did. And when I looked at them, I was overwhelmed. How do you go about including all of this information? You can't. So themes are the way to go. And on your homework page, hopefully some of you came up with some themes, and if you did, please put them in the chat and share them. A theme is just a simple sentence. The topic is the ants. The theme is ants are farmers. Queen ants have a big job to do. These ants can communicate. Those are themes. It's what you're going to talk about. And I think of when I try and do it, I think of an all-encompassing idea that I can hang everything on. And in this case, that all-encompassing idea is these ants form a superorganism. And what makes a superorganism is everything that goes into putting these ants together to survive. And I'm going to talk about one that just fascinated me, which is the queen ant. Queen ant is the largest ant in the colony, about 2 inches long. We can see a picture later. The queen ant is the main character in this whole thing. There's only one. She's the only one that's fertile. And I'm going to give you her lifespan in 15 minutes. Sometime in the year, we don't know exactly when, the queen ant in an existing colony lays eggs that are either male and or female and will emerge with wings. Only time in the year we have winged ants. On a particular night, who knows when, it has to be clear, no rain. Remember, we're in a rainforest. A clear night, they take a nuptial flight. Up into the air they go. Can you imagine standing around and watching all of these ants up in the air, and all of a sudden some of the ants are falling to the ground? What's happening is that queen is trying to mate with as many males as she can to collect as much sperm as she can, because this will be the only time in her 15 to 20 years of life that she will be able to collect sperm. So what does she do? She puts on perfume. We call it pheromones. She makes noises, striations. She tries to entice the males. And when the males get to her, and by the way, I'm talking to adults, when the males get to her, they explode the sperm into her, fall to the ground, they're dead. She takes off to try and find a place to land, start a new colony. She lands, she gets rid of her rings, I don't know how. She digs a hole. She's starting the very first part of this whole lifespan. She excavates and gets a hole. She gets into that hole and she does one thing to begin with. In her mouth, she has some of the fungus that feeds the ants that she's taken from the original colony. She spits that fungus up on the wall. She's hungry. She can't eat the fungus. If she eats the fungus, there'll be no colony because they need that fungus to grow. So what does she do? Lays eggs. Her first eggs are all the nourishment she has. To keep working, she's got to eat. She eats the eggs, some of them at least. She has a fungus that she has to get growing. So what does she do? She takes some of the eggs, mushes them up with her own poop and her saliva, makes them into a mushy ball and puts it next to the fungus. So now the fungus is fed and she's laid eggs. Well, this goes on for another 6 to 10 weeks. She is the one that is keeping this ball rolling. At the end, she'll have millions of it doing it, but she's doing it by herself. Excuse me. She continues, and by the way, she's not going to hurt the ants. She can lay 20 to 25 eggs a minute. Multiply that in a day, and you can see the immense amount of eggs that she can lay at any one time. She continues the process. The eggs emerge as larvae. The larvae begin to grow. And guess what? They need to be fed. What does she feed them? Eggs. She also feeds the fungus. She feeds herself, continues the progress. The larvae actually molt many times before they reach their full size, and then they spin a cocoon. Thankfully, she doesn't have to feed them in the cocoon, but she has the other larvae coming up that she has to keep fed. And this process continues until the first ants are born, full, and within a few days, they're out doing their job, getting the ants, protecting the colony, Oh, by the way, the colony's getting bigger. So what does she have to do? Make the colony bigger. She's got to excavate, but now she has ants that will do it. She has to excavate, making much larger rooms. The fungus is growing. She keeps feeding it, but now she has other ants to do the job. And her whole rest of her life is one thing and one thing only: lays eggs, continue up to perhaps 20 years. And she can have more than 1 million eggs that have grown into adults doing their jobs. Excuse me. That's the story of the ant, the queen ant. What a dynamic character she is in this whole study. And without her, there wouldn't be any. And by the way, if 100 female ants are impregnated, 2 to 3 of them will actually have the opportunity to start a thriving community. So they've got to put out a lot in order to get a few. And then in this talk, in this thing, there are so many ways that could go. You all know, you start with a sentence, you ask a question, they say something, the public says something, and you're on your way, and all of a sudden they ask another question. Well, now what do you have to do? You have to go off your chart. I think of it as a flow chart. Yes, you go this way. No, you go this way. So the flow chart moves out a way, and you might find yourself discussing how many eggs can be laid, or you might discuss the fungus. Oh, by the way, you have to talk about they can keep the fungus clean. They can communicate with each other. The little ants go out, they find the great leaves. They say, haha, I got to tell everybody else. They leave their perfume. They make striations, they make noise with their parts of their body, saying, come here, this is the best tree. And off they go, leading them. They have, of course, the little ants. So you have, and I'm not going to go into all this, but you have all of this. And you never know where you're going to end. You only know where you're going to start. But it's an adventure, and I love it. And that's what I have to say. Would you like to show that one chart of the sizes of the ants, Chris?
Sure, I'd be happy to share that. That was wonderful. Thank you, Ingrid.
You're welcome.
Give me just a second to get that up here. We had a lot of good chat information in the chat bar as well, because there's some folks that are very well informed about these ants. So yeah, this is just an image kind of showcasing all the different sizes in relationship to the different ants here.
And I suggest that we have that made into something that we can use on the floor.
Yeah,
to show
getting
the
that
difference.
laminated and blown up would be no
Right.
problem.
Right.
Because not everybody's going to be able to see the queen this easily, so this is perfect. And I did some math based on what you were throwing out there as far as 25 eggs a minute. If the queen continued to lay eggs continuously every minute, every hour for an entire day, that would be about 36,000 eggs per day.
Per day.
Per day. That's just one day. I'm assuming they're not going to be able to do that many all the time, but still, that was
I'm
yeah.
sure, but the biggest colonies that I could find were 3 million ants.
Yeah, it's amazing.
And some of them die, and they're taken off by the trash handlers. I mean, it is a super organism. And by the way, kids would love this. No one tells them what they have to do. The queen doesn't tell them. They know when they emerge from their idea, this is their job, and off they go and do it. It's amazing, amazing society.
It's totally fascinating. Yeah, and there were some really good points about them being farmers and being gardeners, which again I think is a great theme to talk about. Food is something I always think about, but food is a good theme that's always common and gets people connected. But that idea that they're farming and that they're gardening, I think really fascinates people and connects them. So yeah. And Karen also mentioned for nightlife mating behavior, because the mating behavior that takes place here and the way that you described that was wonderful. I think that's a really, really great way to talk to guests, especially at nightlife, because you're going to get a crowd that's going to be really interested in sharing that information.
Yeah, well, you're not going to talk about bursting sperm into the female to children.
Correct.
Talk about mating, but I mean, let's be realistic.
Yeah.
That's why I asked on the homework sheet, if you select get your target audience, because what you say to them is going to have to do with their age.
Right. Any clarifying questions that folks want to throw into the chat bar here? We've got a couple minutes. If anybody has any questions whatsoever, if you have questions about the homework or how we sort of laid everything out in terms of doing an engagement presentation, feel free to ask that here as well. We're hoping to get a chance at the end of this. We should be on time to give people some time to actually present that if you feel comfortable doing that. But we've got a few minutes. If there's any questions, just type them into the chat bar. Otherwise, we'll move right along. Brian was asking if the colonies are all female. Where do the male ants come from for the mating?
Unfertilized eggs.
Oh, interesting.
When the queen lays them at that particular time, she lays unfertilized eggs, male, fertilized eggs, female. That's the only time during the year that there are any male ants. Once in a while, something. Oh, by the way, I did read that she will sometimes lay unfertilized eggs and they become her food. They feed it to her. So I assume during the year, if she needs more nourishment, she takes care of herself. She gets herself some unfertilized eggs.
Wow.
By the way, Oakland Zoo has a fantastic website that includes an excellent summary of leafcutter ants.
Oh, wow.
Really
Excellent.
well-written, beautiful paragraphs, really easy to see how it all works together.
Wonderful. I will try to find a link to share that. Thank you.
Well, I'll put it on the chat.
Cool. I'm getting a flood of questions in here, so I want to make sure we have time to get through those. There were some questions about the ants escaping the colony from the second floor. To my knowledge, in the new enclosure that they have up there, they have not escaped yet. They are attempting to escape. That is something that they are actively working on. The ants themselves are trying to escape. That's an issue I think that the biologists are constantly contending with, even though they've made some pretty sophisticated designs in there. The ants don't want to be kept in that enclosure, and so that is a factor. But to my knowledge, they have not escaped yet. And there was a question specifically about a chance that an ant is born with the wrong size for what it wants to do. I'm not quite sure. Yeah.
I don't think there's any wanting to do with it. They don't choose. They become. Their size determines what their ability to do, but they don't choose. They don't sit around saying, I would think I would rather do this. No. This is their job. But I did read, as they get older, the younger ants take over some of the jobs and the older ants become the trash collectors, because trash collectors never get in with the rest of the ants. They're carrying possibly parasites and other things, so they're kept apart. And where do they end up? They end up in the trash. So it's a way of them cleaning out, and that's one of the things that happens.
Interesting. Wow. There was a few more questions here. I'll try to get through these just so we can have time for our next speaker as well. But there was a question about, does the queen ever give birth to winged ants who want to kind of go off and take their own colony? I think in terms of that question specifically for our rainforest.
I have no idea what happens in our rainforest about that.
My guess is that the biologists are in there, and she may do that, but the biologists are in there every day, and so they're removing those probably pretty regularly. It's a little more of a controlled environment in terms of that sense. And then piggybacking on that, there was a question too about the rainforest. Originally, the colony was able to move around on tree branches. I think that was and when was that? I think that was in 2008, because when I first came to the new academy, I remember seeing them on the branches there and moving around, and they were able to sort of freely roam, and that started to get chaotic really quickly.
I don't remember that.
I like Alan's question about could you give us an example, Ingrid, of one way to explain how the ants are designated? For you know, small children or people who are not really familiar with that to their specific roles in the colony?
Sure. We have the soldier ants, which are the largest, strongest ants. And by the way, their heads are different shapes and have different pertinences to give them strength. Then you get smaller and smaller, and the smaller ants do the smaller jobs. So the ants that go out to forage, medium size. The ants that protect the foraging ants, teeny tiny. The ants that are in the colony that are going to chew up the leaves, this is a huge story in itself, chew up those leaves are medium to small size. The ones who chew them up the smallest and give them to the fungus are the smallest. So it has to do with size and power. But there's a wonderful, any place on the web, wonderful description of all these jobs they do.
Excellent.
Does that do it, Alan?
I'm gonna just do one last question. Do you have any idea how many ants are in that entire display? Any guesses?
I have no idea.
I don't either. I have no idea either. I feel like it's been mentioned verbally, but I have no guesses. A lot of wonderful questions here about ants, but I want to make sure that we get time to talk about orb weavers and butterflies as well. So please hang on to your questions, and when we get to the end, I want to make sure that I give you a chance to ask those again. But thank you, Ingrid. That was wonderful. Really appreciate it.
You're welcome.
And we're going to switch gears and talk about spiders. And Jill is here to tell us all about spiders today. Take it away, Jill.
Okay. I don't see my face. Am I there?
You're here.
I'm there? Okay. Hi, this is Jill. I'm going to talk about the orb weaver spiders. And I'm sure most of you have seen them in the rainforest. They're actually in 2 locations in the rainforest. They're uncaged between the 1st and 2nd level to the left of the ramp. And that's where you'll see them on their webs completely out in the open. And they're also in an exhibit in a terrarium on the 2nd level. So if you look at them, they all look the same. That's because they're all females. We only have females on display. They're sourced in the US, our spiders, and we actually are breeding them in-house. So we have males back of house, but we don't have the males on display. We don't want them actually breeding outside the back of house areas. But apparently the females are producing many egg cases and doing great. We have to keep breeding them because their life expectancy is not that long. It's between 4 months to about a year. So Chris, if you show the first picture. Maybe. Okay, so here is one of our spiders. Actually has a meal in its mouth. It's eating. And as I said before, we don't have any males on display. These spiders are very what's called sexually dimorphic, which means there's a big difference in size and appearance between the males and the females. So the females can be up to 8 inches long. The males are much smaller, a quarter, even less than a quarter the size of the females. And because they're much more slender, they're much, much lighter, have much less mass than the females. If you look at the color, the female here, she has a yellow abdomen, and then the front of the body, which is the cephalothorax or the carapace, that is kind of reflective. So that's useful to the spider because where they live, it's very warm. They usually live hot climates like Central America down to Mexico, and they need to prevent themselves getting overheated. So the reflective carapace will actually reflect some of the sun's heat. And also you might notice when they're in their web that they direct their abdomen absolutely towards the sun, directly towards the sun, so that the sun's heat is not beating down on the back of their body. So that's a way that they're able to decrease the amount of heat they get from the sun. They also, if you look at their legs, they have these sections in their legs that are very little hairy sections of their legs. And that's also a distinctive feature. And they are actually among the largest spiders if you don't count the tarantulas. So apart from the tarantulas, this group of spiders is really the largest group. And they like to build their webs. As I said, they're in hot climates, and they like to be in humid forested areas, but they often will build their web across the trails or between trees in the orchards. So people sometimes run into their webs because they're often across the trail in the way of where people are walking. Okay, we can take the picture down now. Thanks, Chris. So what do they eat? Okay, they eat things that will fly into their web, right? So flying insects, any type of flying insects, okay? And once the creature is in the web, the spider will detect it there, it will run over, it will bite it and inject venom, and then it'll wrap its prey in silk and will bring it back to the center of the web. And the venom will then liquefy inside the tissues of the prey, and the spider actually sucks it dry. That's how it eats its prey. So the venom is not actually very harmful to people. These are fairly docile spiders, and if they should be upset and they should bite you, you'll get a little bit of some pain, localized redness, but really nothing very dangerous. At the academy, we feed our spiders frozen flies, so we can throw them in the web and they don't escape. So and they will thaw very quickly, so they'll soon be room temperature for the spiders. As far as reproduction, as with most spiders, this little male has to be very careful how it approaches the female, has to just give the right vibrations so that she doesn't eat him. Sometimes she does anyway. And then the female, after mating, she'll lay 2 large egg sacs with about 100 eggs in each sac. And these eggs will eventually hatch out into little spiderlings, which go through several molts until they become the adult spiders. So now I'm going to give you a few more interesting facts. A lot of it is about actually the silk of the spider, which is a really interesting thing. The name of the spider is golden orb weaver spiders, right? So orb means sphere or circular. So you notice if you've seen them in the rainforest, the webs are these wonderful circular concentric circles of webs. And they can be up to a meter or a yard in diameter. And if you include the suspending filaments, 2 to 3 meters in diameter, huge webs. And they are not rebuilt every day. Some orb weavers will do that. These spiders will repair their webs until it's impossible and too damaged, and then they will rebuild their web. But they mainly will maintain their web as long as they can. And the other part of their name, golden orb weaver, means this color of the silk that they spin is a golden color. And I'll talk more about that a little later. So silk is a really amazing substance. Spiders will be able to produce up to 7 kinds of silk. Some sticky, some not sticky, some for their egg cases to wrap them in, some to wrap their prey in. So a variety of different kinds of silk, different functions. And silk is produced inside the abdomen in these glands, these silk-producing glands. And it's basically a mixture of proteins and water in a kind of liquid gel form. But once this is extruded through the spinnerets, which are these little openings at the end of the abdomen, once it's extruded through that, it becomes a solid fiber. And these fibers have amazing properties. For their weight, they're much more strong, or they're much more tensile strength than steel. They have more elasticity than Kevlar, and they will conduct heat very readily. So scientists obviously have been trying to reproduce these proteins to try and make artificial silk. And there's been some success. Some artificial silk has been produced, not in any commercial quantities, but there is ongoing research to do that because they want to make stronger fabric. Like Kevlar, very strong fabric. They could use spider silk. Maybe they can make even stronger fabric. There are a couple of interesting medical uses also of the silk. In olden times, silk was actually used to put on wounds. People would take the spider's web and they put it on the wound that was bleeding, and it would stop the bleeding somewhat because the silk actually contains a lot of vitamin K, and vitamin K will produce or aid in clotting. So that would be a good bandage to put on if you had a cut and you had nothing else to put on it. And the other medical use, which is more recent, is strands of spider silk have been used to help with nerve regeneration. So if you have a severed nerve, they've been able to use spider silk to encourage the severed nerve to actually grow along that strand of silk to the point where it was severed. And this is, a great innovation. And the silk does not apparently cause any immune reaction, no response, from the immune system. So there's no rejection. So that is also a very interesting use of the spider silk. So it's an amazing substance. Finally, remember I mentioned the golden silk, right? Well, silk, they've tried many times to make fabric out of spider silk, and there have been some successes. So Chris, if you want to show me this, the next picture. So this is a garment that was made from the silk of an orb weaver spider from Madagascar. This is not actually the ones we have, but very closely related. And it was actually on display in London in 2012 at the Victoria and Albert Museum. And what this involved was over 1 million spiders. And apparently people would go out every morning collecting 100 spiders, bring them back to this lab where they were able to extrude the silk without damaging the spiders. They could stimulate the spinnerets, and the spider would let the silk come out of the spinneret, and they would collect like 80 feet of silk from one spider. And then these strands were combined into, I think it was 24 strands to make a decent sized thread. And then they were able to weave it into fabric. And they made this amazing cape. And the cape is partly from woven material, and there's partly also has been embroidered with spider silk also. So this is apparently was only ever worn by 2 people, just to show how large it is. So this is not obviously a commercially useful use of spider silk, but this is, as far as art goes, is quite amazing. And the silk is quite sensitive to light and heat, so they have to keep it, when it's displayed, they have to keep it in a kind of a darkened room, a darkened chamber, because it's very sensitive. Okay, so I think, you can take that down now, Chris, thank you. So what I want to do finally is to do a kind of virtual engagement with a pretend guest, and to see how we could interact with the public with some of this information. Where to engage is a good question. I would find if it's busy, most days, it's not really a good idea to stand on the ramp looking at the spiders from there. It's a great view, and if it's really quiet, you could do that. But if there are a lot of people, you're going to be in the way. So it's really best to stand next to the exhibit on the second level, and you can get a much closer view there too. So that's where I would recommend standing to talk to the public. And during this engagement sample, I'm going to ask a few questions. So if you feel like writing your answer in the chat, pretending you're the guest, that's fine. Okay, so, all right, so I'm going to start off. So welcome to the rainforest. We have many interesting animals in here for you to see. I just wondered if you noticed as you were walking up the ramp, did you see any spiders? You did. Well, that's great. Well, if you come up here now, you can see that we can actually see them much closer, because we have an exhibit here where they're behind glass in this terrarium, and you can get a really good view of them from here. So if you look at them, do you have any, do you notice anything special about them? What would you say is special about these spiders? They are really huge. You're right. They are really huge. Okay. In fact, they are some of the biggest spiders in the world, apart from tarantulas. Now look at the shape of their web. What would you say about the shape of their web? Right. It's circular. So in fact, the name of this spider is called orb weaver. An orb means circle or sphere, right? So this is describing the shape of their web. And their other name, the other part of their name is golden. They're called a golden orb weaver. So what do you think that means? Right, it's to do with the color, actually not of them, but of their web. The silk of their web is golden. So they have this huge web. What do they use it for? Why do spiders have webs? Okay, they're going to catch their food in their web. That's great. So what might they catch? What do you think they're going to catch in their web? Probably something that can fly. You're right, something that can fly. Okay, so what flies? What kind of thing would? Insects, right? Some kind of insects with wings that can fly. Excellent. So suppose the insect gets caught in the web. How come it stays in the web? Okay, the web is sticky. That's right. Now what's that? Oh, why doesn't the spider get stuck in its web? That's a really good question. Well, turns out the spider can make some silk that's sticky and some silk that's not. And the spider knows which is sticky and which is not sticky. So the spider can walk around on its web and not get stuck to it. That's a really good question. So the spider gets caught in the web and it's stuck in the web. Then what happens? Okay, the spider comes and it grabs the insect and it injects, it bites it, right? And what it's doing is it's injecting venom into the insect to kill it. And then it wraps it up in silk and it brings it back up to the center of its web to eat it. And then the venom will actually turn the inside of the insect into liquid and the spider will suck it dry. Pretty cool, right? So what about spiders? Do you think they could be useful to humans? Do you think maybe they're a good thing to have around? Yeah, I know some people don't like spiders too much. I totally get that. But actually they can be very useful because if they're catching insects, they can catch insects we don't want, like mosquitoes, for instance. And if they're in the orchards, they can catch insects like fruit flies that might damage the crops of the orchards. So they can be useful. Even in your house, they could be catching insects that you maybe don't want in your house. So there's one more question I have for you. It's kind of tricky, okay? Can you think of any other animal that makes silk? Think about that. I know it's a tough one. Okay, I'll give you a hint. We use the silk of this animal to make expensive fabrics and expensive clothes from it. You got it. You're saying silkworm, right? The silkworm is actually a caterpillar, right? It's the caterpillar that will turn into the silk moth. And the silkworm caterpillar will spin the cocoon that is for the pupa of the silk moth. And that's when we get the silk to make clothes. So we can't do that yet with spiders. We can't make clothes yet from spider silk, but we can make it from silkworm moths. Okay, well, thank you so much for stopping to chat about the spiders. And on your way out of the rainforest, when you leave the rainforest, go upstairs to the mezzanine level and you don't miss the black widow spiders there. You can see we have some black widow spiders. It's just opposite the swamp. Okay, so does anyone have any questions? Thank you.
Yay, that was great, Jill. Excellent job. That was really good. It's been so long since I've actually seen someone engage that even a virtual engagement without a guest was really, really nice to see. So thank you for doing that. That was really terrific. Yeah, feel free to put your clarifying questions in the chat box. If anyone has any questions, feel free to throw them in there. Bev actually asked a question about, does the insect not always stick to the web?
I've seen occasionally insects do escape from webs when they just hit the right silk and they kind of make a lot of movement. They can sometimes fly out, but generally, if they start struggling, they'll get caught up in the sticky stuff and then they can't get out.
Yeah, and I've gotten a chance to see the biologists actually try to feed our spiders in there, and they'll take flies and just throw them into the webbing. The other thing they'll do is they'll put them in the fridge sometimes to kind of get the spiders to not move as much, so they won't leave that web as much. But they also use mealworms and a variety of different things, and they'll basically just either try to toss it in there or sometimes kind of press it in there without destroying the webbing. So that's one way that our spiders are getting fed. Yeah. And I think in the enclosure, they actually just let them loose in that enclosure.
Right, because they can't get out. So.
Yeah, and they'll sort of fly around and then sort of connect onto it. Yeah.
Oh,
So
I saw Jim's question. What do they do with something dangerous like a bee? And I've seen spiders cut something loose from their web if they don't like it. So I guess they can recognize if it's dangerous or not.
Or if it's just not worth it to try to catch it and wrap it or wrestle it, or if it's just too feisty. So yeah, I've seen that as well. Yeah. But I have seen spiders capture bees before. And if the spider is fast enough and can wrap it up, and I'm not entirely sure that orb weeders do this, but other spiders where they wrap it up, they can capture it and still be able to kind of make a meal out of it. Yeah. Great. Well, just a few more seconds. If anybody else has a question, feel free to throw that in the chat box. Otherwise, we'll move right along. All right. I think we're one last question. Any competition noticed between the clothes webs?
Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah.
They are quite close to each other. Yeah. But maybe that's how they are in nature too. I don't know.
Yeah, I'm not entirely sure what, and especially in terms of our the rainforest quarters, how that is affected. The biologist asked us to monitor if we noticed that the spiders were sort of moving, if they were trying to like take over new territory, or if they seemed like they were leaving that area. But for the several months that they had them in there, they said that basically because the food was constantly coming in and they were not being disturbed, they were, they wouldn't leave that space. So yeah, awesome, excellent job, Jill. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
We're going to shift gears then, and we're going to talk about butterflies for a few more minutes. Thanks everybody for sticking in today. And I'm going to turn it over to Nan Sider to tell us all about butterflies.
Thanks, Chris. I don't know all about butterflies, but some about butterflies.
Much as you can.
in a limited amount of time, will do. First of all, I want to encourage you all to go up and hang out at the emergence chamber. And I know that a lot of docents don't want to be up there because it is hot and it is humid and it may not be the most comfortable place to be when you're wearing a wool turtleneck in the middle of the winter. On the other hand, for some of us, we love it. But the emergence chamber is so interesting, and it's such an unusual thing for our guests to see that it really is worth it to them and to you to be up there. I also just want to mention that I know that we spend a lot of time on engagements around the blue morpho butterfly, and it's sort of the iconic rainforest butterfly. But we're going to be talking more about butterflies in general today. So that's the plan. Hold on to your blue morpho thoughts for another day. A quick thumbnail review of butterflies. Butterflies start out as eggs. Those eggs hatch into caterpillars. That's the larva of the butterfly. Over time, those caterpillars grow and molt. And at the last molt, you get the pupa. That's what forms the chrysalis. And the pupa hardens and becomes the chrysalis. We usually call the cocoon, if you will, the butterfly makes a chrysalis, whereas we call the cocoon that a moth makes a cocoon, and they're different. We don't have any moths right now, and we almost never do. We have had them on occasion, but it's kind of rare. So that process of butterfly changing into caterpillar butterfly is called metamorphosis, which simply means changing of shape in Greek. And lots of animals do it. The butterflies in our rainforest are very special. They are not the butterflies that you see in your garden. And sometimes our guests will want to know, well, where are the monarch butterflies? Why don't I see butterflies that look familiar? And that's a great lead into where our butterflies do come from, because they're rather exotic. Right now, and most of the time, our butterflies come to us from Costa Rica. and they come from two butterfly kind of consortiums, if you want to call them that. One is called El Bosque Nuevo, which means the new forest, and the other one is Costa Rica Entomological Supply. And these are organizations that support butterfly farmers who are raising the butterflies that we and other museums, aquaria, scientific institutions put on display. And the wonderful thing about the butterfly farmers is that these are people who might otherwise need to make their living from the rainforest in ways that don't support the rainforest. Costa Rica is very attentive to conserving their rainforests. They very much appreciate, perhaps more than many other countries, the valuable resource that the rainforest is for them. And so instead of having to turn to chopping down trees for hardwood or collecting palm oil, butterfly farmers have been able to find a sustainable way for the forest and for themselves to manage. So it's quite great. Right now we're getting butterflies. We've been getting butterflies about once a month. And sometimes we've gotten them every couple of weeks. It just depends on what's available when. And they send them up as chrysalises. They take up 4 to 5 days to get from Costa Rica, where they leave, to the academy where they get unpacked. And during that time, they have to pass several checkpoints that are USDA and US Fish and Wildlife to make sure that the butterflies are what they say they are, that they are the kinds that our permits allow, and that all is good. Some butterflies can hatch out in as little as a week, as little time as a week. And so if it takes 5 days for them to get here and they can hatch in 7, you can see it's a very tight time schedule. And if there's a hurricane or if there's plane trouble or if the inspections are delayed, it's very easy for that schedule to be disrupted. So with the best intentions, the butterflies arrive here at the academy. Here, I wish, there at the academy. And they usually come in on a Thursday or Friday, first thing in the morning. By the end of the day, they are on display. That's how fast the biologists move. And when they come to us, the chrysalises are packed in kind of protective soft wrappings. And they're unpacked. And if you've looked at the emergence chamber, you can see that there are horizontal rods that go across and that are mounted with little tags to describe what the butterfly chrysalis is. The biologist unpacks each chrysalis, makes sure that it's in good shape, and then with his trusty low temperature hot glue gun, he glues each chrysalis to the acrylic rod. And they have to be glued in just the right position, head down. Some of them you'll notice also have a little, almost like a little thread that suspends the bottom end as it dangles. It's specific to the kind of butterfly, the species of butterfly, in terms of what kind of support it needs. And the biologists are very aware of all of these things. We usually may get somewhere between 10 and 20 species of butterflies at a time. We have permits for about 35, but some of those are either African or Australasian, and we don't get those very often. There's almost always a note on the emergence chamber in the lower right-hand corner of where this shipment has come from, whether it's Central America or somewhere else, and whether it's from El Bosque Nuevo or CRES, and when we're expecting our next shipment. So the biologists want us to be well informed, which is great. So they mount the chrysalises and they mount them hanging down because that's the way the butterfly is going to emerge head down. And the emergence chamber, inside the emergence chamber, it's very carefully controlled for temperature, humidity, and also for light, for daylight versus night, because the butterflies tend to emerge in the early morning. Best time for butterfly emergence is between 6 and 10 in the morning. Once they emerge, they're left to hang there from their chrysalises and let their wings dry. And once their wings are dry, which is usually several hours, they are then moved out of the emergence chamber and into an enclosure, it's a hamper, basically. It's your basic laundry hamper. And there's room in there for a plate of food for the butterflies, because while chrysalises don't need to be fed, the butterflies definitely do. So there'll be fruit and nectar, depending on what kind of butterflies they are. And the butterflies are allowed to stay in that hamper for 24 hours. This gives them additional time to dry, additional time for their wings to strengthen, so that they have a better chance of making it once they're released into the rainforest. They're usually released early in the morning, somewhere before guests come in. And the smaller butterflies, the heliconia, the long wings, the little fluttery ones, tend to stay up on the top floor, where the plantings are in place that offer them nectar and pollen specifically that appeal to them. Most butterflies don't eat pollen, but there are some species that do. The heliconia do, and it gives them it's protein, basically. It gives them more of a longer life. Our other butterflies, the small ones, live on nectar, and the larger ones are fruit eaters. So that morphos and the owl butterflies and some of the swallowtails are fruit eaters, and that's why you'll see plates of sliced oranges or sometimes bananas, whatever, out for them. There are also cups, which I think is just, there's these little champagne cups filled with what I like to think of as butterfly champagne, but it's not. It's a dilute sugar syrup, and if you've noticed, the cups have little red dish scrubbies in them. And those are actually not meant to scrub the dishes, but to give the butterflies footing so that they can stand on the sponges and sip at the nectar without falling into the cup. Butterflies are not swimmers. So that gives them the opportunity to amplify the nectar that they would get from our flowers. So what else can I tell you? We have quite a good success rate with our butterflies. We get about an 80 to 90% hatching, which is quite good. Every now and then a butterfly will hatch that has some kind of wing problem, or the wings aren't fully formed or whatever. And this happens in the wild as well, in nature. We just don't see it in nature because we are looking at the butterflies that are flying around. We don't necessarily have them right in front of our face. The butterflies that we have are living a lot longer than they used to. And I think that this is due to the great attention that they get from the biologists who care for them. And for those of you who have had the pleasure of meeting or working with Tim Wong, who is our main butterfly guy, I believe, he's just great with the butterflies. If you look at the videos, there's one of Tim in Costa Rica exploring a butterfly farm. And Chris, I've forgotten to ask you to put up those pictures, but I'm going to ask you to do it now. Put up if you would, put up the picture with the emergence chamber and the, that one, right. And that's Tim. And you can see a very full butterfly chamber here. And some people looking through another one. Thank you, Chris. And if you'll just do a quick swap out and put up the chrysalis. Chris and the chrysalis. So these are probably owl butterflies. And you can see that they've emerged from the cocoon, the chrysalis. And the one on the right is more open. It's probably been out a couple of hours longer than the one on the left, but they'll get there. So Chris, you could take those both down now. Thank you. Obviously, with not a lot of flights going back and forth right now, we are not getting butterflies. We did get butterflies in March and April, and we're not getting them in May, which makes sense. The Academy, however, is doing its best to support our sustainable butterfly farmers and their rainforest conservation efforts to the best degree that we can. And I know that there's an association called the International Association of Butterfly Exhibits and Suppliers, and they're pulling together funds internationally to try to support sustainable butterfly farmers like the people who provide us our butterflies. Now, guests have all kinds of interesting questions about the butterflies, including, do they bite? I'm not sure where the idea came around that butterflies bite, but you may want to reassure people these don't bite. What I like to ask guests is, have they ever been to a rainforest? Have they seen butterflies like these? Do they have a garden? Do they have butterflies in their garden? What good are butterflies? Yeah, they're pretty, but so what? You know, what's the point? What do butterflies do for us? I like to ask guests if they understand, to whatever degree, what's happening inside that chrysalis. Do they understand that this is part of a process that this animal is going through? And for very little kids, I like to talk to them about the not exactly scientifically accurate book, The Very Hungry Caterpillar, which you may remember from your childhood or your kids' or your grandkids' childhood. I ask people also to look at the chrysalises and to see how they are the same and how they are different. To me, some of them look like jewels. I could make earrings out of some of them. They're so beautiful. Others of them are just completely camouflaged, almost like dead leaves. So that's a whole other direction to go in terms of survival for the butterflies. And I always like to try to mention to guests that by visiting our butterflies, they are contributing to rainforest conservation, because when we appreciate their butterflies, then we're able to get the butterflies, and that supports the butterfly farmers. So that's sort of the quick thumbnail sketch of the emergence chamber. Does anybody have any questions? Thank you, Chris. Yes, it's always been an interesting question.
That was great. Thank you. Yeah.
Chris.
I always feel like chrysalis is wrong, but that is
But it's
grammatically
not.
that is correct. Yeah.
Yeah.
Chrysalidae is also another way to say it, but
It's just a mouthful, and that's why I think it's easier to say cocoons, but it's not entirely correct.
great. That's wonderful. Thank you so much.
Sure.
That was wonderful. If anyone hasn't had a chance to see the video that I shared in that email of the tour of the butterfly farms in Costa Rica, I highly recommend it. It's wonderful, and definitely check that out. And feel free to put any questions that you might have in the chat now. We're gonna questions specific to butterflies, and then after this, we'll open it up to general questions as well. Holly's actually asking if there's a reason that from 6 a.m. to the best 10 a.m. is the best time for them to emerge from their chrysalis. Do you have any sense of like why they emerge at specific times, or?
Well, I just typed in, I think it probably has to do with light and the temperature, but that's more or less a guess.
Yeah.
When we have moths, which we've had Laveau's silk moths, and moths tend to emerge between 2 and 5 in the morning. So it seems like it must have to do with lighting and air quality, temperature, humidity, but I don't know for certain.
I'm assuming wind too. Wind patterns are often lightest between
That could be
the 2 a.m. to like 10 a.m. mark. And if you're just emerging from your chrysalis or your cocoon and you don't have the ability, you're fragile, so you don't want a lot of wind.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Although we don't have a lot of wind in our rainforest.
We don't have a lot of wind in our rainforest, but maybe that's just something that's genetically into them. I don't know.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And then follow-up question too, that you mentioned that the captive butterflies live longer in the wild. Do you have any idea how much that our captive butterflies live longer than they would in the wild? Do you have any idea of how much longer? Did we lose Nan? Shucks. That was our butterfly expert. I will. Oh, Nan's back. So, but we don't have your audio for some reason. Sorry. It's because it's Friday at 3 o'clock. That's why. It's just everything technological. Well, I will do my best to interpret questions. If you want to enter them into the chat bar, that would be great, Nan. If you feel like you can respond to people's specific questions. But in answer to your question, Michael, I have no idea how much longer ours would live. I'm assuming, like most of our things, even things that are existing in the aquarium, things that are in the tanks, they live so much longer because they're getting food, because they're getting healthcare, because there are no predators. There's a variety of things. So yeah. And then let's see. To follow up questions as well. Yeah, Nan's also, for those of you that didn't see in the chat bar, she's saying that some of our butterflies have lasted as long as 6 months, but more than often it's several weeks. And with the heliconias, they're lasting anywhere from a couple of months. So yeah. Let's see. Yeah, so any other questions, feel free to put them in the chat bar. I noticed that Emil had a question about pipevine swallowtail butterflies in the botanical gardens. Yeah, I'm pretty sure once the botanical gardens reopen, we will probably see some in there. I forget what their time frame is about when the pipe vines start coming out and start. It's usually around this point and in summer. I know I've seen the caterpillars around during the pianos when they have that in there in July. So now and into summer is usually the time you start to see those pipevine swallowtails. And that was actually a project of Tim Wong's, the biologist who works primarily on butterflies in our rainforest. He worked really carefully with the botanical gardens to try to bring back this native butterfly species. So yeah, that was a pet project of his. Great. Well, what I would love to do, because we've been going pretty solidly here for a good hour and a half, I want to give everybody a chance to, if you want to unmute yourself and ask any other follow-up questions of any of our speakers, or add that to the chat bar, you're welcome to do that. But otherwise, we're going to kind of start to wrap things up, other than answering some questions. And y'all are more than welcome to leave. Thank you so much for tuning in today. Thanks for being a part of this. I can't tell you how enjoyable it is to see everyone's faces and to actually talk about things related to engagement at the Academy. So I really appreciate everybody for joining in today. Thank you very much. And thanks to all of our presenters, to Bev, to Jill, to Ingrid, to Nan. You all did wonderfully. So thank you so much for making this happen. We're very much hoping to do more of these in the future related to the other specialties as well. So thanks everybody for tuning in. And I'll hang out for a little bit if the speakers want to hang out as well. And if folks want to ask any clarifying questions, please jump in and ask questions. But otherwise, y'all are more than welcome to leave. Thanks again. Hopefully all our speakers can see all the wonderful praise that's coming in the chat bar there. Y'all did an amazing job. Thank you so much.